Hello. This video presents the paper on strategies to embed sustainability in the higher education institutions, a context of India. I'll discuss about obstacles HEIs find and how they are trying to overcome them in their specific contexts, and will conclude with the recommendations on what can Indian HEIs do to integrate sustainable development goals in their core functions. I have included the research papers by Global University Network for Innovation, Tandon and Pandey, Hall and Tandon, Community-Based Research and Social Responsibilities of Higher Education, UNESCO, UNDP, OHCHR, and primary data collected while working with university students, NGOs, international bodies like enactors, and government departments. India is one of the critical countries where achievement of the SDGs is essential to realize the 2030 agenda in a decade. SDG 1, no poverty. 1/3 of the world's poor are in India. SDG 2, zero hunger. There is continued hunger amongst some indigenous and caste communities, labor, and other below poverty line. SDG 3, health and well-being. Child malnutrition indicators in India are worse than in several low-income countries. SDG 5, gender equality. Entrenched patriarchy restricts education for girls after puberty. In many communities, I won't say all, women are not awarded projects and government tenders, not considered comfortably for higher level that involve execution and decision-making positions, not paid similar to the male counterparts. SDG 6, clean water and sanitation. Access to safe water is decreasing, and several Indian cities have the worst air pollution levels in the world. There is sewer water being mixed to the government supply of drinking water. This journey is long, and much needs to be done in India for systematic progress on the SDGs before 2030. I think every country and every human being, every community, every department needs to do a lot. Right now, I'm talking about only education and India. India's higher education sector is the third largest in the world. There are 903 universities, more than 10,000 professional technical institutes, and 42,000 colleges in both the public and private sectors. India has made significant progress towards implementing the scheme of education for all. Several key programs and policies have been initiated to provide free and compulsory education to all children in the age group of 6 to 14 years as a fundamental right. Initiatives such as Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan and Right to Education have given the impetus to education system in India. Current approaches adopted by India to contextualize SDG 4 in the Indian context by integrating them into the formulation of new education policy to achieve quality education. The new policy replaces the previous National Policy of Education 1986. The policy is a comprehensive framework for elementary education to higher education, as well as vocational training in both rural and urban India. At the policy level, Niti Aayog, led by the national government, has created a national framework for regular collection of data on the SDGs and taking actions to achieve the goals. The Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, MOSPI, is assisting Niti Aayog to interact with other ministries and to develop indicators reflecting the SDG goals and targets. So far, Niti Aayog's SDG India Index report showed uneven progress, especially in hitherto marginalized communities and regions. Commensurate engagement of civil society is also pushing for further concerted actions at the ground level. However, higher education institutions have remained somewhat disconnected from the SDGs. Considering 2030 agenda, introduction and sensitization are mere eyewash because the need is to embed the SDGs to the core of the system and bring results to the ground zero. The University Grants Commission, UGC, the senior policy-making body on higher education in India, announced a new policy framework fostering social responsibility and community engagement in higher education institutes in India. These new guidelines recommend that the goals of fostering social responsibility and community engagement in HEIs can comprise of improving the quality of teaching and learning in HEIs by bridging the gap between theory and practice through community engagement, promoting deeper interactions between higher education institutions and local communities for identification and solution of real-life problems faced by the communities in a spirit of mutual benefit. Facilitating partnerships between local communities and institutions of higher education so that students and teachers can learn from local knowledge and wisdom. Engaging higher institutions with local communities in order to make curriculum, courses, and pedagogies more appropriate to achieving the goals of national development. Catalyzing acquisition of values of public service and active citizenship among students and youth alike, which would also encourage, nurture, and harness the natural idealism of youth. Undertaking research projects in partnership with local communities through community-based research methods. Further, the above guidelines recommend that existing courses should be redesigned to integrate interactions with local society in learning processes. Additionally, these guidelines propose that new courses that are relevant to changing societal contexts should be offered as options to all students. The Association of Indian Universities, AIU, is the oldest such network, mostly including public institutions. The Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, FICCI, Higher Education Committee, has been bringing together private institutions for the last 2 decades. Neither has inspired their members to focus on the SDGs as a core function of HEIs. Not even Niti Aayog, a national approach to achieving the SDGs in India, contains any mention of HEIs or their possible contributions. A review of the recent times Higher Education THE ranking report on universities and SDGs shows that only a handful of Indian universities are mentioned. No elite public institutions such as IITs and IIMs are mentioned at all. This report only focuses on a few goals and looks at how universities operate internally in this regard. It goes on to argue that Indian policymakers need to think about new roles for HEIs in supporting the achievement of the SDG 11. The recently published Global University Network for Innovation GUNI report on higher education clearly argues that social responsibility emerges as the need to reconsider the social relevance of universities in light of the encounter of the local with the global regarding priorities, demands, impacts, and knowledge needs in the context of globalization. The competitiveness of nations as the only way to achieve progress should be balanced with inclusive social development and sustainability of the entire global population. If an HEI is viewed as a public institution located in the public sphere contributing to public purposes, its the specific social responsibilities would be adopting and mentor of the civic university pursuing the public good by aligning its interests with those of society and working collaboratively with the other HEIs to maximize their collective impact. Playing a proactive role in ensuring that SDGs are included on local agendas, proposing changes to education, conducting research and engaging with local and global communities on sustainable development. Imparting education needed to make the SDGs a reality with the necessary knowledge, skills, competences, partnerships, and values, thereby helping to produce new SDG leaders. Building capacities for SDG policies, planning, and management. Conducting transversal reviews and refinement of curriculum to ensure the mainstreaming of SDG issues across curricula, and including new values and practices for economic development and that enhances social equity while reducing environmental risks. A significant mission of HEIs is to prepare the next generation of professionals and provide young people with the knowledge and competences required for effective economic and social life as an adult. The integration of the SDGs in teaching, as illustrated above, is critical for the next generation of professionals and intellectuals. New sustainable frameworks have to be developed, learned, and taught. Similar expectations arise from the core function of research at HEIs. As put by Hall and Tandon, in the context of the SDGs, research needs to contribute much more. Research shall provide new solutions to various socioeconomic challenges, and new knowledge will be essential through appreciating and incorporating alternative perspectives of knowledge. Community-based participatory research, CBPR, has now been recognized as the methodology for co-constructing knowledge worldwide. HEIs can develop other similar arrangements at country levels to promote CBPR in finding new knowledge solutions through local partnerships. International associations like the International Association of Universities, IAU, and Association of Commonwealth Universities, ACU, are already playing such facilitative roles. In India, some efforts that exemplify ways in which Indian HEIs are attempting to integrate the SDGs in their core teaching and research functions. First example I will take of forest management. An example of expanding the curriculum to introduce the SDGs to a compulsory course for students of the Masters in Forest Management can be found at the Indian Institute of Forest Management in Bhopal. Foundational teaching of the SDGs is linked to development management, preparing students to use adaptive techniques in the context of achieving the SDGs, thereby becoming forestry and natural resources management professionals. SDGs and climate resilient strategies in Wayanad district of Kerala, that is the second example I would quote. The greater goal of this project is to make Wayanad a SDG ready model for India, meaning it would be climate resilient and able to adapt to climatic changes accordingly. Wayanad is an active landscape with the people, their practice and culture being deeply integrated with their surroundings. Sustainable planning and design principles is often misunderstood to mean energy efficiency only. Sustainability, when deriving ideas from the field of and local and sensitive practices, is based on the need to be self-reliant and to adapt to changes. Planning principles need to include change and plan accordingly and also be static. In order to be sustainable, climate resilience is an important phenomenon. This can only happen if we are adaptive, anticipative, and absorptive towards change. Teaching SDGs to engineering students, the Humanities Department at Delhi Technological University, DTU, has undertaken some initiatives to teach sustainable development goals to engineering students. I would quote as my third example, since the SDGs are not part of any course content or pedagogy, a few responsible faculty members have tried in their own stride to introduce this perspective and these ideas to the students. The idea of sustainable engineering. Engineering students acknowledge the importance of food cycle systems. They felt that engineers can contribute to the processing and transport of natural resources in closed-loop systems. This can reduce waste and increase efficient use of resources. Likewise, engineers can contribute greatly to the extraction and development of natural resources, the processing and modification of resources, the design and construction of transportation infrastructure, the recovery and reuse of resources, and the production and distribution of energy. Engineering efforts to help to reduce pollution at all levels. The correlation between information and communication technologies, ICT, and sustainability. The content generated by the students is thought-provoking, but lacks rigor. This could also be because of their distance from local realities. I would quote some outcomes of that study. The first clear lesson is that students are interested in learning about SDGs and how they can contribute to finding solutions. This reality is globally recognizable that students are interested in issues of sustainability, though different higher education courses and programs may relate to different sets of SDGs. Most of such initiatives are led by individual academics who are passionate about some of these sustainability issues, but we need to to bring those things at the institution level. The initiatives must be institutionalized. Deliberations at the level of higher leadership, such as VC, DVC, deans, and departmental heads is required to gain momentum. Conferences and seminars on the SDGs are effective to build awareness, but developing and implementing action plans is the need of the hour. The absence of a national policy framework that encourages HEIs to focus teaching and research on the SDGs tends to reduce continued efforts in this direction. So policy guidance and earmarked funding acts as an incentive to introduce new curricula and pedagogy linked to teaching the SDGs. In India, the biggest challenge facing institutional integration of the SDGs in teaching and research activities at HEIs comes from academic disciplines. Each discipline has rigidly defined frameworks of what can be taught. Curriculum and course outlines are approved only when they follow rigidly specified disciplinary requirements. Not only is teaching content at the undergraduate and postgraduate levels rigidly defined, but even the pedagogy of teaching is tightly specified. And it has to be followed rigidly, otherwise students are not able to pass and achieve the degree. Even as SDG perspective regarding potable drinking water and water quality is difficult to introduce to such rigid chemistry courses. Disciplines also specify research methodologies. Sociology, economic, and physics each prepare researchers in those disciplines to follow a specific methodology. Bound within these disciplinary rules, journals and publications also follow similarly rigid specifications. New approaches to engage and partnership research is hard to practice in such rigid disciplinary architecture. As disciplinary boundaries are rigidly specified and their pedagogical and research methods are uniquely regulated. As disciplinary boundaries are rigidly specified and their pedagogical and research methods are uniquely regulated, it is very difficult to cross disciplinary boundaries to generate multidisciplinary teaching and research teams. Since all SDGs can only be understood in multidisciplinary frameworks, the rigidity of discipline specifications is a hindrance. There is a similar challenge is faced in the teaching of medicine, nursing, and pharmaceuticals alone does not make students understand SDG 3, health and well-being. The training of financial managers, bankers, and investors to focus attention only on maximizing profits. Management education still requires substantial attention to the SDGs in order to prepare future managers to take business decisions in the light of sustainability requirements. So far, I have discussed the problems and issues related to the HEIs in India. Now, I'll mention some solutions, some recommendations for the same. Indian education system needs to overcome the rigidities and frameworks of professional education as established and monitored by the respective councils and regulatory bodies. Need to proactively design new frameworks for professional education that integrate both the contents and the intents underlying the SDGs. What kinds of actions may be required for a supportive ecosystem to emerge that will spur HEIs to make their contributions towards the realization of SDGs? First and foremost, leadership of HEIs and universities must encourage institution-wide appreciation of and learning about SDGs. Platforms of vice chancellors and university presidents must put this urgently on their agendas. National and provincial ministries responsible for higher education policy and higher education councils must encourage, mandate, and resource such shifts towards linking the core functions of HEIs and universities to the SDGs. Associations of teachers, researchers, and universities can play a mobilizing role by placing SDG on the agenda of their forthcoming meetings. Students can become key champions of higher education engagement with SDGs. Local, national, and international student associations can focus on SDGs in their forthcoming meetings, seminars, conferences, thereby generating demand for universities' authorities to act. International networks and associations of universities can do likewise to promote engagement with the Sustainable Development Goals. UNESCO has a special role to play in this regard. Its regional and national associations and offices should be proactively convening dialogues with universities to promote such engagement with SDGs. Civil society in India needs to begin to demand greater involvement of HEIs in the achievement of the SDGs. HEIs should be held accountable for teaching SDGs to the next generation of students and professionals. The 2030 Agenda and specific SDGs should be the focus of locally relevant research by HEIs. India's large and rapidly growing higher education sector needs to urgently focus its core functions of teaching and research on the SDGs. Not only will their enormous educational and intellectual resources be valuable for finding local solutions, but they will also be able to mobilize future generations to pay attention to sustainability challenges in the decade ahead. India's HEIs can do that by awareness-raising initiatives, more and stronger partnerships, lobbying for an improved policy environment, and support for transdisciplinary work, and also between HEIs and other institutions and organizations will be of key importance in the quest towards implementing the goals set for 2030. As evidenced, central to the legitimacy and quality of a society-wide agenda is the design of multi-stakeholder policy development and implementation modalities to encourage and facilitate partnerships between government and nationally and subnationally active stakeholders networks of civil society, universities, think tanks, the private sector, workers and employers, organizations, other development actors, and national human rights institutions. The inclusion of the full diversity of stakeholders means paying specific attention to the inclusion of all voices, including women and children, with a particular focus on marginalized groups and individuals. If we are able to take this overall progress and consider it on urgency, the HEIs can play a real role in embedding the SDGs, the strategies, to the core functions. And definitely, these students will become our champions of the future and the leaders who will make the further progress and development sustainable for India, and definitely they can be the beacons for the world. Thank you very much for listening to these important issues. I'm sure you at your own levels will put in the best foot forward to understand SDGs and bring it to the real life. If you have liked this video, do share with other people who can really bring change to the society. Do subscribe to the channel as well as like and share. Your support is very important. Thank you very much.